Good day, folks, and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with your host, the Anorak. Since I've managed to lift up my spirit a bit with Pink Floyd's A Momentary Lapse of Reason last time, let's hope to keep that up, if not more so, with another progressive rock album. This time, one from nearly 50 years ago, and by a slightly lesser known band. Yes. I've already talked a bit about them way back when I reviewed their third album, the Yes album, and somewhat recently with their eighth album, Going for the One. And now I'm covering their fifth album, which should especially be fitting since this one will be turning 50 years old very soon from the time I'm making this episode. So let's not waste any further time as we jump into Yes's 1972 album, Close to the Edge. The cover is minimalism at its finest, a gradient of black and green giving off this sense of mystery and the unknown. Plus, it's the first to feature the ever-iconic bubbly Yes logo designed by one of my favourite album cover artists next to Storm Thorgerson, Roger Dean, who also made this beautiful painting of this landscape that's both unearthly and yet unearthly and earthly at the same time. If you want to see and hear more in-depth analysis of the artwork itself, check out a recent video by Polyphonic, which I'll link to in the description below. They're a very great and very insightful channel that deal and analyze with a lot of classic rock music as well. But with that little bit of coolness of the cover aside, let's actually get into the music itself, shall we? Side A consists of the titular suite, Close to the Edge. Pretty much the centerpiece of the album, this piece is an underrated suite, up there with the likes of Atom Heart Mother, Supper's Ready, and Shine On You Crazy Diamond. And since this track consists of various sections, I'll try to cover each of such at a time. And obviously joke about them, of course, because snug is kind of my thing. In fact, it's a lot of internet reviewers' things as well, for that matter. Starting with the first movement, The Solid Time of Change, which begins with various sounds of nature, birds singing, rivers flowing, etc., already painting us this peaceful and tranquil world, like in the inner artwork, just as a synth crescendo appears before erupting into a rather uneasy guitar riff from Steve Howe and chaotic drumming from Bill Bruford, as if some menacing force of discord and anarchy is coming out of nowhere and disrupting the peace of this world. Here and there happen to be brief vocal cut-ins, if that's a good term to describe, again adding to the very anarchic nature of this little bit here. And after about 3 minutes into the suite, this cacophony eases aside as we get a decent guitar solo over the organs and keyboards by good old Rick Wakeman, and the bass by the late great Chris Squire. And then at the 4-minute mark, we actually get proper vocals and lyrics from John Anderson himself, singing about a seasoned witch who would call you from the depths of your disgrace. And I'm hoping that witch would taste nice with the seasoning. After a few more verses of lines, we get the first occasion of this particular chorus. Down at the edge, round by the corner, close to the edge, down by the river. And after another verse and chorus, we also get the other line that will appear more than once in this musical piece. Seasons will pass you by, I get up, I get down. These two lines will appear more than once across this suite, in some shape or form, different speeds, melodies, etc. The second movement, Total Mass Retain, starts off at the 6-minute mark, and at first it seems to generally share the same verse melody as the first movement, but the Squire bass is slightly more noticeable here, and the Down at the Edge chorus appears in a variation, a faster pace here. I crucified my hate and held the world within my hand. No doubt he crucified such next to Brian of Nazareth, or whatever remains of him. There's you, the time, the logic, or the reasons we don't understand. There is logic in what John Anderson says, or sings. After another verse about sad courage and armored movers, we get that down at the edge chorus again at a much faster pace. Another one of the variations of such as we may notice onward. And after yet another verse of startled memories and guessing problems, we get the chorus of down at the edge and I get up, I get down at mostly normal like the first, albeit at a different key. Then we get a brief yet decent organ solo from Wakeman himself before we transition to the next section 8.5 minutes into the overall track. The third movement, I get up, I get down, is when things ease down a bit as we get a familiar sound that may be from a mellotron. Haven't heard from these in a while. Among this are also synthesizers and the sounds of water driplets, creating this image from this overall ambience of being in a vast and heavenly cave or cavern. A bit of uncertainty, yet also a bit of warmth at the same time as well. Then at the 10-minute mark, the backing vocals of Chris Squire and Steve Howe sing about a lady in white lace looking so sadly while saying that she'd take the blame for the crucifixion of her own domain. Again, no doubt crucified next to Monty Python's Brian, as well as John Anderson's own sense of hate made physical. Speaking of, John himself then returns to sing the familiar I get up, I get down chorus before a brilliant organ from Rick Wakeman comes into display over 12 minutes in, giving off this bit of a vibe similar to Toccata and Fugue by Bach, like we're in a church or something. And in a good way of that. In fact, for this part, Rick Wakeman actually played the pipe organ in St. Giles Without Cripplegate Church in London, from major chords to minor chords. The third and last movement, Seasons of Man, is when things pick back up again, with some sudden slamming of synth notes along with the rapid-fire pace of the drums, similar to the opening, as if we're cycling in some way back to the start, essentially a reprise. But things go from minor back to major as Rick also plays his classic Hammond organ again, in a hyperactive solo and manner on par with Keith Emerson and Tony Banks. Then as part of the reprise, John sings a few more verses, such as the time between the notes that relates the colour to the scenes. Who knew musical notes could actually be used for painting? According to the man who showed his outstretched arm to space, seems either Plastic Man, Elongated Man, or Mr. Fantastic tried to see how far they could stretch upward. Then it seemed to have backfired when the arm ended up depriving of oxygen and freezing up. Because space and all. While John shook his head and smiled a whisper, knowing all about the place. And he also doesn't make deals with peasants. Points if you actually remember that reference. And of course, we get the grand return of that familiar chorus, close to the edge, and I get up, I get down, in a more uplifting and triumphant mood and tone. Then this suite ends on a rather, triumphant note, as we hear those nature sounds once more, as if nature itself has returned to peace, balance, and order after a bit of chaos and sorrow. It's not much wonder why this is considered one of the best songs and iconic songs to come out of Yes, if not out of any prog rock band in general from the 70s. Then we get to the two tracks of Side B, the first of which being And You and I. Despite being 8.5 minutes shorter than the previous track, this too consists of 4 movements, which I'll again try to look at each at a time, and again maybe snark about them if given the chance and opportunity. The first movement, Chord of Life, begins with a calm and soothing 12-string acoustic guitar from Steve Howe, similar to the opening of Roundabout from Fragile, the previous album. In fact, you could just hear him saying okay right at the very beginning, as if he was doing a take or giving a signal, and they just left it in the final cut. This goes on for about a minute and a quarter before it starts lusciously strumming, along with a little drum beat and triangle ping. Then we soon get the mini moog, played who else by Ricky Wakeman, doing a little short but very sweet melody. And about a minute and 40 seconds in, the vocals of John Anderson kick in once more, this time singing about a man conceiving a moment's answer to a dream, the dream, of movement regained and regarded both the same, emotions as the ocean made, and all complete in the sight of the seeds of life with you. So reading from that, plus the fact that this part is called Chord of Life, I'm sure you might imagine what it could be about. No doubt you've also seen The Birds and the Bees. Then the key soon changes as John's vocals become double-tracked, with Steve and Chris's backing vocals distorted through a Leslie speaker and offering a counter melody of different lyrics from John's, before they come together into a majestic harmonic chord that flawlessly transitions us over to the very next section of the track. The second movement, Eclipse, is much slower in rhythm and shorter as well, with grand crashing drums from Bill Bruford and that always fantastic mellotron from Rick. This, along with the I Get Up, I Get Down movement from the title suite, this feels like heaven made into musical form. In this, John only sings one bit, a repeated set of verses from the first movement, coming quickly to terms with all expression laid, emotions revealed as the ocean made, as a movement regained and regarded both the same, and all complete in the sight of seeds of life with you. Again, I'll leave it to you to interpret what the seeds of life may mean exactly. Then it goes into a reprise of the opening acoustic guitar melody before it then goes into the next movement. Again, possibly a good use of leitmotifs. The third movement, The Preacher, the Teacher, starts off with Steve playing a new melody with said acoustic guitar, along with Rick's moog, as John sings once again about a sad preacher who nailed upon the colored door of time. Seems the son of a preacher man is a little bit depressed. The insane teacher be there and reminded of the rhyme, in that he's driven mad by the impressive amount of perfect rhyming across this track and the previous. There'll be no mutant enemy we shall certify. So, the members of Yes happen to be big fans of the X-Men comics back in the day? Pretty cool if that be the case. After all, Paul McCartney of the Beatles once did a song about Magneto, Titanium Man, and Crimson Dynamo. Yes, seriously, I'm not even kidding about that. Check it out on YouTube. It's from the Wings, Venus and Mars album. Anyways, as you might guess from the title of this part, this involves a preacher and a teacher, training to lose his name, traveling and asking to be shown the same. In a way, preachers and teachers are alike in general ways. While teachers often offer and provide intellectual knowledge, preachers offer and provide spiritual knowledge. Or in other more simple words, smart scientists and crazy creationists. Wakeman is definitely at his element with this section, playing the organ and Moog synthesizer together in the main spotlight. Then things get a little grandiose and even a bit operatic, indicating the climax is very close as it all crashes down together before bringing us over into the proper finale. The fourth and final movement, Apocalypse, acts as the short bittersweet conclusion to this 10-minute piece. Lasting short of the last 45 seconds left of the track, this mostly consists or is occupied by the steel acoustic guitars of Steve Howe and John's tender vocals as he sends us out of this piece with a little epilogue-like vocal coda, a culmination of sorts. And you and I climb, crossing the shapes of the morning, and you and I reach over the sun for the river, and you and I climb clearer towards the movement, and you and I called over valleys of endless seas. And in you and I, there's a new land, angels in flight, my sanctuary. Ask your parents about that one, kids. Or very much older siblings and cousins. And we end out this album with the third and last track, Siberian Khatru. According to John Anderson, the word Khatru roughly translates to as you wish in the Yemeni Arabic dialect. So really this title should be Siberian As You Wish, although that may not have as much a ring to it. Unlike Close to the Edge and You and I, this song doesn't have any proper sections or movements in it. In fact, it's the shortest of the three, at nearly 9 minutes, but it's still just as complex nonetheless. Already, this has one of the best intros to any rock song from the 70s, beginning right off with Steve Howe's bluesy guitar, Bill Bruffer's drums, and then of course Rick Wakeman's mellotron playing those distinct notes, fast-paced yet otherworldly, like a good chunk of this album in a nutshell. And over a minute in, John's vocals come back in, ordering a bird of prey to sing as beauty begins at the foot of you. To be fair, that Birds of Prey movie isn't exactly what I'd call beautiful. Then there's the chorus, where Siberia goes through the motions, holding out, holding up, and holding down the window, river running down over my head. Must be John having a nice cold shower as water pours down his long mane of hair. Afterwards, we get another verse where John asks, how does she sing and who has the ring? Well, obviously, Amazon has the ring of power. And after another chorus, we get two solos here. A harpsichord from Rick and a steel guitar solo from Steve, both of which are just as vibrant as always. Before John comes back to sing some of the repeated verses from earlier in the song, then he sings some more cryptic lines, like June cast, moon fast as one changes, heart gold lever, soul mark mover. I'd try to come up with a joke for any of that, but I honestly don't know if I even could with this kind of weird stuff. Then soon after, we return to a reprise of the melodic opening that mostly goes on for the remaining 2 minutes and 40 seconds of the song before fading down to a close, leaving us just as mesmerized and mystified, if not even more so, than we were getting into it. So that was Close to the Edge by Yes, and it's just epic and fantastic. Sure, it's 3 songs and 3 really long songs, but these 3 songs are beyond rock and roll. They're like modern day symphonies, the titular suite especially, seemingly influenced by the likes of Richard Wagner and Igor Stravinsky. Despite their lengths, they're very interesting as they are thought-provoking. In fact, despite being labelled as progressive rock, which is often associated with experimental structuring of the music, the 3 songs seem to generally follow the same basic song structure of intro, verse, chorus, middle, eight, chorus, outro. But they seem to be pushed to the boundary in a way that makes them grand in scale yet personal and intimate. Something close yet far off and fantastical. Same with the enigmatic lyrics as well. If you haven't listened to this album before, I highly recommend it to any fans of epic rock tracks. And if you have already, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it's Yes's best album and among the prime examples of prog rock? Or is there another Yes album that you prefer more? Feel free to express your thoughts down below in the comments. Next time, we get into a bit of dream time as we, ladies and gentlemen, cover a classic album by Kate Bush. Hey, mate. Oh, hey, Jameis, how's it going with you? Well, quite a bit, to be honest. Being stuck at a desk job at the SCP Foundation for nearly the whole summer. It's not exactly what I'd call exciting or even really amounting to much. But at least I'm not being chased down by eldritch monsters or something. And I'm sure you at least have access to a computer that's actually working properly. Well, what's the matter? Well, long story short, Maze, my desktop computer started freezing, blue screening, and just booting up as if nothing had happened at all. Then, partway through my Ziggy Stardust review, the computer decided, for whatever reason, to screw around with the internet connection, and then eventually cut off any and all sound. Again, for no reason. Which meant I was unable to use my mic and webcam, and I'm still unable to use those. And now I'm having to rely solely on my iPhone and MacBook. Oh man, that's a shame. I would have wanted my own review show, where I'd talk about awesome movies and cartoons. You know, like Electro with Jennifer Gardner, Transformers Energon, and Shadow the Hedgehog. Yeah, sure, Naughty's boy. Anyways, maybe it's because the computer couldn't really keep up with age in the long run. After all, we've had it for like, what, nearly a decade at this point? Might be the reason. Not to mention the second year of uni is starting very soon, and I'm not very sure if I'm even ready for it right now. Listen, I know how it may feel having to go back to university and just the feeling alone of having to come back there and the inevitability. But if you keep your head down and your spirit up, you might actually make it. After all, you made it through the first year, haven't you not? I suppose so. Plus, with Linkara nearing the end of the Contest of Champions, Big Jack Films seemingly out of hiding, and Indie Fan defeating Crocodile and that weird Skeletor wannabe, maybe things really are starting to pick up round here. Assuming, of course, that Spacer Rat geezer doesn't turn up again. It's been a while since we, or at least I, have last seen him for that matter. Maybe so. We'll see. Anyways, you folks want to get something to eat? That coffee machine, SCP-294, could offer any drink we may desire. Oh boy, do I! I hope it does Virgin Cola, the best drink ever, in my opinion. I'm sure it'll do that, kid.